All right, good morning, guys. I'm just going to do a very short lesson today, and I'm going to split this set of notes up into air masses, and I'll do a separate one on fronts tomorrow. So, air masses today, really short lesson, and just to describe what this is all about. It's a pretty important concept because it leads into some other stuff that we're going to be getting into this week. So, let's start by just defining what an air mass is. An air mass is a very large area of air, a large body of air that's essentially uniform. So that what that means is it has, generally speaking, the same temperature over that whole region and the same humidity over that whole region. Now, is it perfectly the same? No, but relatively speaking, the whole entire area has approximately the same temperature range and the same humidity range. Now, the important thing about temperature and humidity, we already learned about humidity last week. Temperature and humidity completely influence all of the other variables that are involved with weather. So it's going to influence the density of the air, which is going to influence the pressure of the air, which is going to influence the wind speed, and then how much cloud cover there is, and then how much precipitation there is. So, understanding air masses, and before this, understanding humidity is a pretty important concept. Now, on the right on the slide, you'll see there is a picture of North America, and you can see some of the air masses that are located over North America and out into the oceans in the Pacific Ocean as well as the Atlantic Ocean. And these air masses kind of take up this whole entire space. And so think about it like a big blob of air that's hovering over this region of North America. Okay. Now, all of them are going to be described based upon those two things which I mentioned earlier, based upon their humidity and based upon their overall relative temperature. So, humidity we describe based upon where they originated. Where did they come from? Where is their source? And so, the humidity is either what we call continental or maritime. Continental refers to originating over a continent, over land, which would mean that it's not as humid. It's drier air because it's coming from over land. Maritime air comes from the ocean. Think maritime like marine. Okay, so this is out in the water. It originates out over the water, maybe over the ocean. And in this case, because it originated in the ocean, it's going to have a higher humidity. A lot more evaporation puts more water into the air. Okay, so maritime is very humid, continental is dry. Now, the other thing we describe is the temperature, and there are three different temperature descriptions here. Tropical, referring to warm or hotter air that originates closer to the equator, down in the tropical regions, which range from 23.5 north to 23.5 south. So those are the tropics near the equator. There's also what we call polar air. Polar air is cooler, originating near the poles, but also just kind of north, usually like north of us in Canada and that region. And then we have what's called Arctic air. Now, Arctic air is unusually, exceptionally cold, really, really frigid air that comes from the really far reaches of the polars. Okay, so like the North Pole way up in that area up there in the Arctic, okay, above the Arctic Circle. And occasionally that air swings down into our area. Okay, so those are the descriptions: continental, maritime, referring to humidity; tropical, polar, Arctic, referring to temperature. And it's always listed with the humidity first and the temperature second. So as you can see on this slide, and by the way, all these abbreviations are in your reference table on page 13. All of these air masses have a description. So there are, as you can see, 5 of them listed. So the first one, MT, lowercase m, capital T. The lowercase is always the first thing. It's referring to maritime or continental, the humidity. So MT is maritime tropical, which means it's originating over a warm ocean. So like the South Atlantic, South Pacific, or even the Gulf of Mexico when it's coming into North America. Continental tropical would mean that it originated over land, but it's warm. So, like the middle of the desert of, let's say, Mexico or Texas or in that region. Okay, so originating over the dry, hot air. Maritime polar is referring to air that comes off of the ocean, but it's cold. So, we're talking northern parts of the Atlantic as well as the Pacific. Okay, and this is humid air, but it's cold air. a lot of snow associated with that. Continental polar is dry, cold air that originates from the middle of of North America up north, like in Canada. And then finally, continental Arctic, referring to extremely, exceptionally cold air that originates from way up north in Canada. Now, you will notice that there is no maritime Arctic. Why? Because north of the Arctic Circle, when it's cold, the ice is covering the ocean. And so there's nothing that would be maritime up there because it's not originating from liquid water. Okay? So those are your air mass codes, and they're all on page 13 in case you're not sure which one's which. You'll just have to know which these refer to. Okay, what does continental mean? What does Arctic mean? What does maritime mean? What does tropical mean? Okay, now here is a map that I'm going to fill out, and you would be probably asked questions like, what is this air mass coming from this area? So let's start on down here in the bottom left-hand corner. So you can see this is originating from over the water. So that would be called maritime. So I'm going to put a lowercase m. And it's in a warmer region because it's down south here. So that would be a capital T for tropical. So MT, maritime tropical. This one here is originating over land. So that would be continental, lowercase c, but it's warm because it's down south. So that's CT, continental tropical. This is originating over water. The Gulf of Mexico is pretty warm, so that's maritime tropical. Okay. And this one here is also maritime tropical. Again, this is in the water, originating from the Caribbean area, warm, humid air. Okay, this one up here. This one is a little bit further north. As you can see, it's kind of off the coast of Canada and Washington State over there in the northwest. That's what we call a maritime polar, okay, because it's originating over the water, but it's colder, so that's the P for polar. This one over here is also maritime polar, so MP, and that's referring to, again, over water, but cold. This one is in the middle of the continent, so this would be continental polar, okay, because it's colder, but it's over the continent. This guy up in Alaska, this would be continental Arctic because it's way up north up there. Okay, so that's your 5 different air mass codes put in their proper places. Okay, so that's essentially something that I would probably ask you, like, what is this air mass? Where is it coming from? Okay, and here's another map that shows the exact same thing, where they're coming from and where they're going. Now remember, air masses don't stay there, they move across the globe. And so this maritime polar air mass is going to bring humid, cold air into this region. The maritime tropical air mass here is going to move up and into like the California coast as well as into Mexico down here. So these air masses move around from place to place, and that's what gives us our changes in the weather. Okay, now that kind of brings us into our next topic, which we're going to talk about more tomorrow. But notice this map. I love this map because it shows you a lot of different things going on. So this is a continental Arctic air mass. Notice how it's up here hovering around in the middle of the like northern United States and Canada, but it's moving down, bringing cold air into the United States. So it moves. This is a continental polar air mass that's kind of covering most of the country in this region. So most of the country it's cold, but this is exceptionally cold up here. Okay. Down here, this maritime tropical air probably came down from or up from the Gulf of Mexico and is moving up this way, and it's going to move up into the northeast. And then this is swinging around this way. Now, all these red lines are all what we call fronts. This is the leading edge of the air mass, and that's bringing that colder air. So this is a cold front. This is also a cold front, and this is a warm front. So we're going to talk about those guys tomorrow. Okay, so that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about air masses, just ask. Okay, thanks.